the Minoans had. They had hot and cold water, flushing toilets, and so on. So he describes their living exactly. And then Plato goes on to describe the Minoans' port. And he describes ships and subterranean harbors and walls of the breakwaters being built of stone, which exactly fits what's on the Theora fresco. So you can look at the fresco and then read Plato's description of what he's written, and it's all there. Amazingly, Plato says that they had elephants on the islands, which formed the basis of their empire. Now, I thought to start with, this is absolutely ridiculous. You can't have elephants in Mediterranean islands. It's absolutely absurd. So he must have been wrong. But I went into it, and I found to my complete amazement that, in fact, all these islands did have dwarf elephants 2,500 years ago. And you can see the skeletons of these dwarf elephants in museums today. So it's absolutely true. So really everything that Plato described can be attributed to Minoans. And where I think in the past people have got fixated is the Atlantic side of Plato's story. He says that beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which is the Straits of Gibraltar, there was a Minoan, an Atlantean base. And this is exactly what there was. There was the people, the Minoans who mined the copper in the Great Lakes, had to have houses for their workers, which they built. And you can see the ruins today. So essentially, and then Plato describes once again the islands where the Atlantis people lived, and he describes a round island, which is Santorini, 12 miles across, which is exactly the right width, with its center, Great Harbor, which is exactly what there is. And he also describes the second metropolis, which is a rectangular island, which is Crete. And this rectangular island had all sorts of perfume, flowers, vegetables, and fruit. And again, everything he describes this metropolis island having is to be found in Crete. So I say that the whole story is true, that the Atlantis was in fact an empire of islands and trading outposts which stretched from North America, the Great Lakes mines, all the way across the Atlantic, across the Mediterranean to India. And it was just as Plato described it, a very advanced, civilized society who, until they got greedy and decided to attack Greece, were a formidable people. And because of their greed, the gods decided to destroy them.
There's a lot of emphasis on trying to figure out where Atlantis was. And what you're saying here is it's a series of islands that represent a trading outpost and an empire. Then it's not really in one particular place, right?
It had absolutely, exactly that. It had its center and metropolis on the islands of Crete and Santorini.
Okay.
And it had outposts in Egypt, India, Middle East, Mesopotamia, right across the Mediterranean, southwest Spain, northwest France, Orkney Islands, southwest Britain, Stonehenge, and, of course, the Great Lakes itself.
I really want to bring in the Bronze Age for a moment, because throughout the Lost Empire of Atlantis, it feels like you clarify again and again that there's a major misperception with the Bronze Age.
Yes.
And that this is a missing piece, that there was economy, there was trade, there was security, there was military. Yes. Talk about it for just a moment so we have a full breadth of this. Well,
the Bronze Age was based on bronze. Bronze is an amalgam of copper and tin, 90% copper, 10% tin, or perhaps 88% and 12%. And now these two substances or metals were not found in the same place. There is very, very little copper in the Mediterranean, virtually none in Egypt, not much in India, and there there was tin for a short while, a place called Kultepe in modern Turkey, but that got used up. And after that, that was used up, the tin at Kultepe, you had to go outside the Mediterranean to get tin, which in fact was found in southwest England on Dartmoor. Now, the advantage of bronze is it's easy to make the metal by simply pouring in tin and copper. And once you've made it, it's very easy to cast, and it can be turned into very efficient saws, axes, weapons, and so on. So once you've got the ability to make bronze, you can make saws to cut planks to build ships. You can use it for spades and shovels to dig the ore out of the ground. You're home and dry. You are the world's most leading civilization. So the ability to make bronze and carry the components of bronze across the world, which the Minoans had, put them in an absolutely unrivaled position. Because to take Egypt, to build the pyramids, Egypt needed very, very hard saws to cut the stone, which before bronze was made, there were no saws. So the Egyptian pyramids, in fact, were a derivative of the Minoan Empire.
Wow, that's a big statement. Now, I think you should qualify this, that you have a great love. One of your greatest loves is Egypt, and you've been there many, many times.
That's correct, yes. I have. I've been to Egypt many, many times. I've been to the mud pyramids, Saqqara, and to the more famous pyramids on the plateau beside Cairo. And building these pyramids was simply a gigantic achievement. They had huge blocks of stone, each weighed about 40 tons, very accurately cut. And again, they could not cut it without these saws. So they needed a wholesale supply of thousands and thousands of saws. Now, the trade, therefore, the Minoans brought to Egypt was they brought bronze, and they brought from America tobacco and coca, and they took to America in exchange cotton. So the Bronze Age in Egypt was very much dependent on the Minoans. Now, you can see right the way through, bronze doesn't rust, iron rusts, and therefore there aren't many Iron Age hordes of weapons and equipment and so on. Whereas bronze does not rust, and it stays buried in the ground. It remains in pretty good nick for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So the Bronze Age hordes, which have been found right across the Minoan Empire, show that bronze was the absolute key to wealth. They made offensive and defensive weapons with bronze, so they had sharp swords and daggers and arrowheads.
Now, you're still talking about the Minoans as you're talking about the bronze.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
They had beautiful jewelry. They had kitchen equipment made out of bronze, ladles, knives, saucepans, frying pans, and more or less sort of standardized kit for kitchen, which is found all over the Minoan Empire. They had tools for cutting wood and for farming, spades, harrows, sieves and rakes, and so on. And they had a lot of bronze jewelry, which can be made very thin and very easily malleable and so on.
So what was a misperception about the Bronze Age?
Well, I've done very little original work, and I've used the research of very distinguished professors who are much cleverer and more experienced than I am. I don't think people have put down carefully and analyzed where did the copper come from and where did the tin come from, and can you establish by the impurities in the copper exactly where it did come from? The answer is, I think, in this case, yes, you can.
You know what? I used to think when I asked questions, I got myself in adventurous trouble, if you know what I mean. But when you ask questions, look out. Everybody should duck.
Well, you're sweet to say.
That's true. You and your wife have also, I want to tell you throughout the book,